October 19th. On a moonless night, U.S. ground forces draw first blood in Afghanistan.
Under the direction of the President, Special Operations Forces, including U.S. Army Rangers, deployed to Afghanistan. They attacked and destroyed targets associated with terrorist activity and Taliban command and control.
It's a highly visible show of force, grabbing for just a few minutes a lightly guarded command post and airfield 60 miles from Kandahar. It is, in part, a diversion. That same night, 300 miles to the north, two Special Forces A teams, each with about a dozen men, are secretly dropped onto remote mountainsides to establish the U.S. military's first contact with a group of Afghan warlords. They are known as the Northern Alliance and have been fighting the Taliban for years. Only now are these American soldiers telling their stories. Most still insist we not use their full names to protect their families from possible retribution.
Everybody knew as soon as they stepped off that helicopter, he just made history. Like, man, I can't believe I'm doing this.
I initially thought we may have bit off more than we could chew, because if you got in any type of trouble, you weren't getting away. There's nowhere to go.
Some Alpha team's going up to the top, Bravo team's staying back.
It is the beginning of an amazing military operation, fought mostly in the shadows by soldiers who grow beards and dress like natives to protect themselves. What they accomplish will repeatedly surprise both the enemy and American commanders. While the president was willing to send tens of thousands of troops if necessary, the goal was to try to fight this war with just a few hundred American soldiers on the ground. They would work with scattered bands of Afghan militia, trying to forge them into an army strong enough to topple the Taliban regime.
We are facing somewhere in the magnitude of 50 to 60,000 opposition fighters of all flavors and stripes that included Taliban and Al-Qaeda.
Colonel John Mulholland ran the operation from a base just outside Afghanistan.
We very much understood that this could be a very difficult fight against a tenacious foe.
These elite U.S. troops have never set foot in Afghanistan.
Helicopter, Pakistan.
They do not know the languages or the leaders. Only a handful of CIA operatives are on the ground ahead of them. But these soldiers, mostly Army Special Forces, make an immediate impression on skeptical Afghan allies. What they have is a direct link to American air power.
We were like, where do you want the bombs? And they're like, yeah, right, like you'd have a plane here in 10 minutes. 10 minutes later, a plane was coming overhead, dropping bombs on them. You want to talk about immediately establishing rapport with these people.
November 5th. Just 17 days after U.S. soldiers arrived, the first major offensive of the war begins, high in the mountains south of the strategically important town of Mazar-e-Sharif.
The terrain was so forbidding and high, you simply couldn't cross it with vehicles, so we wound up moving on horseback, and horseback alone with small donkeys carrying American equipment.
Sitting on mountain ridges a mile or less from the enemy, special operations teams using lasers and GPS coordinates begin calling in airstrikes, methodically shredding the Taliban front line. It turns into a rout, a mixture of modern and medieval.
They are amongst the bravest people I've ever seen. You see guys walking along ridge lines in the snow with no shoes to go to a fight and have one magazine of ammunition. You know, that tells you something about their level of commitment.
November 10th. That commitment pays off. After 5 days of intense fighting, Mazar-e-Sharif falls. News of this victory energizes anti-Taliban forces across the north, who have spent years sitting in trenches begging the U.S. for help. By now, half a dozen Afghan factions in the north have been joined by American teams. There are still only 75 U.S. soldiers on the ground. November 13th. In one incredible 24-hour period, just 3 days after the collapse of Mazar-e-Sharif, 3 major cities fall. Herat in the west, Tahlequan in the north, and finally the capital, Kabul.
And we pretty much continuously bombed 24 hours a day. As soon as one left, another one come in. Sometimes we'd have them stacked up 7 deep, you know, just bombing.
November 14th. The day after Kabul falls, the U.S. sends its first small team into the mountains of the south, near the town of Tarin-Kaut. This is where the Taliban has its roots and greatest strength. The team is to help a Pashtun tribal leader named Hamid Karzai, who, unlike other warlords, has no army.
We wouldn't have been able to fight with them on our own. There were about 1,000 Taliban troops, Arabs and non-Arabs and everybody else with them, and about 100 vehicles that they had. And we didn't even have 10 vehicles, all of us together.
November 17th. U.S. aircraft being directed by American soldiers with Karzai rain bombs on Taliban attackers. Karzai's small force takes the town of Tarin-Kaut, the first Taliban defeat in the south.
That really cemented both our rapport with the local Afghanis, and I think it also established Hamid Karzai as both the leader of the people and as a military leader.
November 25th. After their sweeping victories in the north, anti-Taliban forces surround the city of Kunduz. It falls, creating the largest mass surrender of the war, but it almost leads to a disastrous setback.
It was difficult to convince our counterparts that these soldiers need to be disarmed, searched, segregated.
The prisoners, mostly Al-Qaeda, are trucked to an old fortress near Mazar-e-Sharif, but not all of them are disarmed. As CIA agent Mike Spann and special forces begin interrogating them, suddenly there is gunfire. Spann is killed, and a bloody three-day gun battle erupts. Most of the Al-Qaeda fight to the death.
I think we're all a little bit amazed at the tenacity that they had displayed and the skill. It would have been a catastrophic blow, at least at that time, had Mazar-e-Sharif been recaptured by the Taliban.
The prison revolt is put down, with U.S. airstrikes pounding the prison fortress. Hundreds of Al-Qaeda and Taliban die. Remarkably, one surviving prisoner is an American citizen, John Walker Lynn. This is the last major battle of the North. December 9th. After 4 days of heavy fighting, Kandahar finally falls. Hamid Karzai, now interim president, enters the city.
People wanted to get in on the fun of the parade, or just to see Mr. Karzai or be a part of this momentous event. And so by the time we entered Kandahar, it was over a 100-vehicle convoy. It was just a madhouse.
Kandahar is the last major city in Afghanistan to fall. The U.S. still has fewer than 200 special operations troops scattered across the country. 1,000 Marines recently arrived have not yet been called upon for any major battles.
It turned out that destroying the Taliban was the easy part. Finding Osama bin Laden and the Al-Qaeda leadership turned out to be a much more difficult task.
But in less than 2 months, the Taliban army had been destroyed and the Taliban government replaced with transitional leaders eager to work with the West.
You should be down like this.
Never before had special operations teams played such a huge role in an American war. They turned ragged bands of Afghan militia into a conquering army. What these U.S. soldiers did promises to reshape how America goes to war for decades to come. John McWethy, ABC News, the Pentagon.